what are the problems that you solve? What are the problems that potential customers have that you solve? Don't just talk about your products and services. People are always interested in founder stories. What in the world caused you to create this company? Why did you decide to make this company, not another one? Why did you focus on this problem and not another one? People love that. That kind of thing. That's why they love to come on your show, right? They want to tell that story. Tell it. Let us know. We want to know what your founder story is.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today, we're thrilled to have David Meerman Scott, a marketing strategist, best-selling author of The New Rules of Marketing and PR, amongst other books, and the originator of the term newsjacking. David's work has influenced how marketers think about real-time engagement, fandom, and the intersection of brand authenticity and cultural relevance. He's helped companies ditch the stale playbook and move fast, earn attention, and build fan-powered communities. Today, we'll explore how his thinking is evolving with AI and how it's reshaping the marketing landscape and how founders can stand out without losing their soul. Welcome to the program, David.
Hey, thanks, Brian. So good to be here. I love that last line, without losing their soul.
Yeah, I remember your book had a profound impact on me. 15 years ago when I read it, I was getting into demand gen marketing, growth hacking is what you might call it today. And I was gobbling up every book that I could read at the time. So for the audience out there, I found you through a mutual connection that I think we both invested in. I was like, hey, I know David Meerman Scott. Like, I should invite him on the podcast, and here you are.
Well, I'm glad you did. Yes. Yeah. So I'm pretty active in the whole startup land community, which is super exciting. So yeah, I think we did meet through a mutual investment / advisory company that we're both working with.
It's amazing. So you've been challenging traditional marketing for the last couple decades. What's stayed true and what's changing, or what's changed the most?
What stayed true, and this is absolutely true now and has been ever since I've been a marketer and pops up basically in every book I've written a dozen, is that people, when they're doing their marketing, their public relations, their selling, talk way too much about products and services. I mean, and you see it and I see it. It's everywhere. Buy my product, buy my service. Look at how wonderful we are. Look at how much better we are than the other guys. But the truth is, people don't care about your products and services. They care about themselves. They care about their problems. So as I see it, this hasn't changed since I've been writing about it for almost 3 decades. And that is that you've got to understand your buyers. You've got to understand the problems that they face, and you've got to understand how they describe those problems. What's the actual language they use? And then be able to articulate how your organization, and perhaps it includes your products and services, might be able to help them. And that's, as simple as that sounds, a lot of people, the majority of organizations, the majority of marketers are still, decades later, still talking about their products and services way too much.
Yeah, and this is especially a problem in Silicon Valley with startups, right? These tend to be technical co-founders talking about their technical chops and what they've technically built.
Exactly. And how this particular feature moves a piece of data from here to there. Well, great, but how does that solve problems? So I think that has been something that has remained constant since I've been a marketer, and that's a long time now. And what's different, and it's constantly changing, which is why the book you read, The New Rules of Marketing and PR, originally came out in 2007. It's now in the 9th edition, and it sold 500,000 copies around the world in 29 languages. And I have to keep updating it because the tools and the technology of marketing is constantly changing. When the first edition came out, I'm not sure if you read that one, it was 2007. When the first edition came out,
I think I might have read the second edition. It was around 2011, 2012.
Yeah, around there, second or third edition. When the first edition came out, it did not include Twitter. Twitter did exist when the book came out, but it had not been popular at the time I was writing the first edition. At the time I was writing the first edition, Facebook was only for students. And so the book comes out June 2007. And it was a great month. It was probably the best month ever to have a book called The New Rules of Marketing and PR come out, because it was the same month that the iPhone 1 was released. I stood in line, I got my iPhone 1, and at the same time as my book was coming out. And around that time was when Twitter started to take off, when Facebook became available for people other than students. And a lot of other things in the world of marketing changed in the summer of 2007. Oh my gosh, there's no Twitter in this book. It says Facebook's only for students, and a bunch of other technologies changes. So I knew I had to do a new edition. And fortunately, it sold ridiculously well when it first came out. We were selling thousands of copies a week. And so my publisher was eager to have me update it. And then as soon as it was updated, it was some of the technologies had yet again changed. So I'm constantly changing the book to make sure that it reflects the current thinking. Sort of a funny story is that I think it was around the second or third edition. Google Plus is out. We ought to talk about Google Plus. And then 3 editions later, Google Plus is gone. We got to get rid of Google Plus. So there's things are constantly changing. Now, of course, we all know, and you obviously know, you've talked about it before. We're in this AI revolution, artificial intelligence revolution. It's changing everything. As we're recording this, as we speak, mid 2025, agents, huge new development that we all have to be thinking about. So it's constantly evolving when it comes to technologies and tools, but the fundamentals have not changed.
That's really interesting. So what are some of the new rules of marketing, for the audience that hasn't read the book, that they should be aware of, especially for our, more startup focused VC audience?
So the original version of the New Rules of Marketing and PR, I talked about the older, and by the way, this is still valid, still applies absolutely 100%. The old rules were that to generate attention, you had to either buy attention, and that means buying advertising, buy a trade show booth and go exhibit,
magazine
or
ads, whatever.
Magazine ads, or banner ads
Radio
on the website, or Google AdWords, whatever it is. You're buying attention. You also had the opportunity to generate attention through the media. I call that bugging people for attention. So you have to go to members of the media and say, please write or broadcast about my products and services. And the third way you can generate attention is you can have an army of salespeople. If you're a B2B company, they can be knocking on doors or virtually knocking on doors and or doing cold calls or reaching out through LinkedIn or whatever it is. And so the old rules is that you either had to beg for attention or buy attention or bug people one at a time for attention. But now, this is going back to when I first wrote the first edition, still applies. You can generate attention yourself. You can create great content. You can do what you're doing, make a podcast or a video channel or whatever it might be to generate attention yourself. And that's ultimately a more productive way. It also happens to be more fun than spending a whole bunch of VC money on an agency to run ads for you. It's a lot more fun to maybe start a podcast and talk to interesting people or whatever it might be to generate attention for your business.
Yeah, I remember the Marketo definitive guides. I remember reading, I was a Marketo certified expert.
Okay.
And I was really studying that, creating content, creating a blog, email lifecycle marketing, and your book kind of dovetailed really perfectly with that at the time.
It did. And I know Marketo well. I'm on the board of advisors of HubSpot, have been since the very beginning, 2007, when they had $250,000 in revenue and 8 employees. As a VC, I know this will warm your heart. I joined their advisory board. I think it was the second year that HubSpot was around, and only $250,000 in revenue and 8 employees. I forget the exact number now, but something like $2.5 billion in revenue, 8,000 employees, something north of 25 billion market cap. So it is possible to hit a massive grand slam in the VC world. Fortunate to have been able to participate as a member of the board of advisors continuously now for 18 years. So it's pretty cool.
It's amazing.
Great success story. And by the way, HubSpot asked me to join the advisory board because of the New Rules of Marketing and PR, because those ideas dovetailed nicely with what the services that they were offering. And we implemented the ideas that you and I are talking about right now into HubSpot. And I'm in no way taking any credit, but we did build the initial playbook around these ideas that we're talking about right now on this show.
Yeah, create content, build your email list, earned media and have direct
Absolutely.
relationships with your customers at scale. I mean, it's all part of the same
And
wave,
build
that happens.
fans, be human, and don't talk about your products and services. And interesting, the HubSpot example I love about this is, they could have said, we're HubSpot. We're a great solution for you to manage your marketing. We're a great customer relationship management software. They could have done that. They didn't. What we focused on in the early days was the idea of inbound marketing. That was the term that we coined. Brian and Dharmesh, the co-founders, together with my help, wrote a book called Inbound
Right.
Marketing. I wrote the foreword. I helped them to get it published. You may have read that one as well. But
Okay. Yeah.
inbound marketing was a concept. It was the idea of, we talked about this earlier, what are the problems that your buyers face? How can you help them solve the problems? Well, you can do outbound marketing. We talked about that, buying ads and so on, or you can do inbound marketing. And because at HubSpot, we marketed the idea of inbound marketing, created the inbound conference, we focused extensively on this idea. That was what helped them grow in the early days. I think it would have been a very different outcome if we had said, we have a great product, you should buy it. And we didn't. We said, you should understand the idea that marketing has changed. It's now about inbound. Here's how you can learn about inbound. Come to our blog, come to our conference, check out our YouTube channel. And then some of those people said, oh, these guys seem pretty smart. I wonder if they have products and services I can use. Well, yeah, they do. And now there's 250,000 customers who have bought those products and services.
I love that, because you're basically communicating the content of how to solve the problem that your customer has. And you're talking about the
Correct.
problem. You're showing empathy, understanding, and you're communicating with them about that problem space, not about the solution. It's, by the way, there's a solution here. And I think the way Marketo did it at the time was, they didn't describe how to use Marketo. They described how to solve the problem. And by the way, you're going to need a tool to do that. And we have a tool, but they never mentioned it. It was just, here's how to go do it. And then you could go implement their strategies on HubSpot or any other, Eloqua, Pardo, any of those platforms. But Marketo was basically telling you how to do it, and so was HubSpot. And then, oh, by the way, we have that stuff.
That's exactly right. And that is essentially, in 2 or 3 sentences, as you just said it, the playbook. And that is the playbook that works, especially for these sorts of companies that you and I work with and invest in and advise, technology companies, is, figure out how you help people and talk about that in a way that people can relate to. Don't just talk about what your wonderful product and service does.
But by the way, there's a feedback loop in that, because as you write content and understand the problem more, you're better able to build the products and services to solve that problem, because you're living the problem and communicating how to solve it. It's kind of what, like you're saying, what we do with this podcast. We have people like you that are experts in different areas come on and talk about the problems that startups are facing, the problems that LPs are facing, the problems that VCs are facing. It helps me do a better job at Team Ignite and helping all our startups, helping our VC community, helping our LP community.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And I don't have my own podcast, but I've been a guest on something like 300 or 400 different shows, and I love doing it. And the hosts like you that are smart understand that what a great opportunity to not just have a guest that I have a conversation with, but to learn from them in such a way that you're benefiting your customers. And I know you do that because, I've talked about it, but that is a huge benefit of doing a show like this. I frequently interview people for my blog. I don't have like I said, I don't have a podcast or video channel, but I've been doing my blog now since 2004. So what is that? 21 years.
Yeah, I've read some of the articles.
And I've got hundreds of different, I call, case studies or whatever you want to call them. But it's really awesome to interview people and learn their story and then tell their story. Like I could say, here's how to do marketing. And people are like, yeah. Or I can say, here's what we did. And I just did this in the case of HubSpot. Here's what this company has done. Here's what that company has done. And let's learn from that, including me, because I learned from it as well.
Yeah. And I tell everybody they should have a blog or a podcast.
And there's another reason for that. You may have been going here, but the reason to have your own podcast or blog or whatever it might be is you want your own content real estate. So LinkedIn is great, Twitter, whatever, TikTok, whatever channel you're on, cool. But ultimately, you don't own that content. The social network does. And they can change it at a whim. LinkedIn can change their algorithms such that people aren't visiting your page or your profile anymore. Google Plus can decide they're going to just go away and delete the entire service. So you're at the mercy of their algorithms and you're at the mercy of their products and services if you're devoting all of your attention to an established social network. But if you do what we just talked about, you've got your podcast, I've got my blog, I've got a website and other content that I create that I own. Okay, now then you are creating the kind of content that you can control and own and use in many different ways. And I'll give you just one example. Now we're in this world of artificial intelligence. It's super interesting in so many levels. But because I had all of that content that I created, 21 years of blog posts, various books, various podcast episodes I've been a guest on, speeches that I've delivered, there's a lot of content that's been created. So I've taken some of the content that I own, whether that's my blog posts or speeches that I've delivered, and I take the audio transcript from the video of the speech, and I put that all into a proprietary artificial intelligence bot that I use to essentially query my own brain. And it's super awesome because, as we all know it, ChatGPT or Claude, whatever it is, if you're using it in the normal way, you're accessing public internet data. But if you're using it with your own proprietary GPT, your own proprietary database, wow, that's cool. That's super interesting. So you can really only do that if you're creating your own content. And it might be marketing content like mine. So, blog 21 years of blog posts, fabulous asset. Or it could be every sales call your company made, or every customer support query that was answered either through email or on the phone or whatever it might be. Take all of that data, run it through your proprietary artificial intelligence engine, and you can use that to query to learn so many interesting things. And that is something that I think every single company should be doing, is having their own artificial intelligence engine driven by their own data.
So funny you mentioned that. We actually have a startup called Storytel in the portfolio that literally does that. And they're going to be on the podcast pretty soon. But they help you basically connect all of your personal and enterprise data, either or all, and do what you're describing basically at scale as a platform, right?
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm bullish on a company like that. That idea is really, really interesting. And there are other ways that you can do that. But the idea of that company, what's the name again?
Storytel.
So Storytel, as you just described it in a couple of sentences, is the kind of product that becomes really interesting. Use the metaphor here. If they tell their story properly and you say, hey, you've got a whole bunch of data, hey, David, you've got 21 years of blog posts. We can help you organize that and create your own chatbot around it. That's really, really interesting. Right. And I think that kind of thing
We're describing prompting techniques to query that if you were to have a platform like Storytel, kind of right. That's the content marketing, inbound marketing thing. It's like you're describing this problem, how you might solve it, but not really going all the way to saying, hey, by the way, use Storytel.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And I'll give you a use case. Before we started recording this, we were talking about Italy, and I'm off to Italy in a couple days as we're recording this, and I'm doing a speech. I've delivered, I think, 6 or 8 different talks in Italy over the years. 4 or 5 of my books are published in the Italian language. And so my talk is next week. And so I can go to my own chatbot and I can say, please give me any examples about marketing in Italy or marketing of Italian companies and then it'll spit out the various things I've written about Italy and different examples, even if it was 20 years ago. So, and what a great head start to creating a customized talk that will be appropriate for this particular country that I'm happen to be doing a speech in next week.
Yeah, 20 years of content can't possibly, just recall out of the blue?
I can't remember it. And a simple, I do have a word search feature on my blog, and my, davidmeermanscott.com. You can just go to my blog and see it. You can use the word search feature, but that doesn't necessarily get at a detailed query where I would say, you're going to be delivering a talk in Italy next week. It's going to be for both business to business and B2C marketers and salespeople and executives. Please share any examples of success in Italy and in Europe that I can use in the talk, and bang, it'll give me a whole bunch of them. It's my material. Right. It's my content.
Yeah.
And it's just organized in a way that I can use. Oh, well, I forgot about that story. I wrote about that 10 years ago. How cool is that?
Yeah. And I'll forget people we've had on the podcast, 200 episodes.
You won't forget me. You won't forget me.
This episode, but well, you're in my long-term memory. That's why.
Yeah. Because if you've read one of my books, you've spent 10 hours with my content.
Exactly.
You got it stuck in there somewhere.
I still have it on my list to write a book at some point, but I finished one on investing in AI, and it just petered out. I just got too busy, honestly, with a couple hundred startups in the portfolio.
Well, let me know if I can help there. One of the things that I've been doing over the last couple of years, since the pandemic, actually, is helping authors to write their first book. I've helped about 25 different authors. I'm on the board of Forbes Books. I've written 12 of my own books. I've helped a dozen authors, no more than that, 2 dozen authors to write their first books. The first one, as I mentioned earlier in the show, was Inbound Marketing by Brian and Dharmesh. That was the first time I did that. So
yeah, we talked about that offline. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. And for anyone else who's listening, you want to do your book, I do some book coaching.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So getting back to marketing, especially around the startup community, we talked about what stayed true. What's changed the most?
Well, we talked about earlier this idea of tools, the different techniques that you can use to reach people, whether that's just a different social networking channel that didn't exist before, or how you can use AI and other tools to get out there. I mean, that's just such a profound change that it sort of overwhelms a lot of the other changes that are out there. And I think even though those tools are super, super important, I think that's actually leading to an interesting opportunity for marketers. And that is, and I've been thinking a lot about this topic, that is, as more and more people use artificial intelligence, as more and more people double and triple down on digital marketing, not saying there's anything wrong with any of those things, those are good things, but there is, I think, an increasing competitive advantage to humanizing your approach to marketing, humanizing your business. So what does that mean specifically? The more photos and images and videos of people that you can share on your social networks, on your website, in other ways is really valuable. Have the CEO talk directly to the camera and do a 30-second or 1-minute description of why they started this company. Interview clients and have them share how they're helped by that product or service. Hold a client conference and even open it up to non-clients. And if you're a tiny startup and you only get 35 people the first year, there's nothing wrong with that. Bringing those people to humanizes you. And, when I wrote a book called Fanocracy, it came out a couple of years ago. I wrote it with my daughter, Reiko. Wanted to get a millennial female perspective as well as my perspective. And the idea of Fanocracy is one of the things we studied is the neuroscience behind how and why someone becomes a fan of something. And that's one reason why I have this surfboard behind me, because I'm a big fan of grain surfboards. And I actually built this surfboard.
You actually go surfing on the East Coast? Is there any good spots out there?
Oh, yeah. There's good surfing here.
Really?
I live in Massachusetts. The window of water temperature is fairly short. I'm starting my surfing now. I'll go usually through mid-October.
Well, that's the benefit of the East Coast, though. You get the swell from the Caribbean. So it's actually warm up there in the summer, whereas on the West Coast where I'm at, it's cold all the way down to maybe San Diego, Southern California until the summer.
No, I get some warm water in sort of mid to late August into early September. My water's above 70 degrees, which is kind of remarkable for as far north as I am outside of Boston. And
so no wetsuit. You can just get out there, paddle out then.
I wear a wetsuit. I've got sub 10% body fat. I get super cold, but so I do wear a wetsuit. I'm a fan of grain surfboards, and people become the neuroscience of fandom that we learned when we dug into this idea of how and why people become fans of something is that the closer you are to another human, the more powerful the shared connections and the shared emotions. And that's actually a survival technique. It goes back thousands and thousands of generations because, proto-humans sitting around the campfire, if you were with your tribe of people, your family group, your tribe, you were safe and comfortable. But if another tribe came, you were on edge, you were sensing danger. And that's still true of our brains today. It's hardwired into us, which is why if you get into a crowded elevator or a crowded train car, you can feel a little bit wary. And inside of 4 feet is the most powerful. And so at the cocktail hour of your conference or at the meals of your conference or when people are having an opportunity to meet one another and shake each other's hands, they're within that 4 feet. And it's a very, very powerful connection that they're making not only with you and your employees, but with other customers. And I'm reminded of that with the surfboard because Grain Surfboards, they're located in York, Maine, has a 4-day build your own surfboard course, which I took, and I built the surfboard at their factory with their super cool and super talented factory workers. And there were 4 other people in my class, and we bonded unbelievably strongly with the people at Grain Surfboards. And here I am talking about them because I'm a fan. I've got another Grain Surfboard that I use on a regular basis in the water. This one's just never been in the water, never had wax on it. It's very pretty. It's my decoration, and I love it so much. I had to go back and build a second surfboard at Grain Surfboards. So the idea of bringing humanity to your business, even if you're running a tech business, for example, is a really, really powerful concept that I think is a change that we're seeing right now with some companies who are trying to do it as everybody else is going digital AI. And, I see people kind of do the doom scrolling thing and, their eyes glaze over and it's getting increasingly difficult to break through in that way. But if you kind of go back to the future, if you will, and think about how can you possibly bring humans together in some way, or this is another aspect of neuroscience called mirror neurons, bring people together virtually so that they have that bonding. And I can share with you how the mirror neurons concept works. So I mentioned this idea that the closer you are to someone, the more powerful the shared emotions. And there's a neuroscientist named Edward T. Hall who talked about different levels of proximity to another human. Further than 12 feet away, he called public space. And we know people are in our public space, but we don't yet have a bond with them. So imagine you're on a sidewalk and you see someone walking towards you and they're 12 feet away. Between about 4 feet and about 12 feet is called social space. That's where the bond begins. And then I said earlier, inside of 4 feet, that's called personal space, super powerful bond. But it's also true of what we're doing right now. We're creating this video, we're talking to one another, and it's true of photographs and videos on a website. And the reason is because of another aspect of neuroscience called mirror neurons. And mirror neurons are the part of our brains that fire when we see somebody doing something as if we're doing it ourselves, which I'll demonstrate with a lemon and a slice of lemon. So if I take a bite of the lemon, my mouth, it's really powerful to bite a lemon. My mouth waters, my eyes kind of close up. I can feel it on my tongue. And I'm just like, wow, lemons are powerful. I'm feeling that. My brain is firing, but Brian, your brain is firing too. Are you tasting my lemon?
Yeah. No, I'm getting a little of the pucker.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, that's
so that comes from mirror neurons. And the same thing is true of video. Like right now, we're 3,000 miles away. I'm in Boston, you're in California. Obviously, we're not in the same room. Yet, our brains process this conversation as if we're in the same room. And because of the way we're both cropped about the same distance, because of the way it's cropped, it's as if we're sitting across from each other at a cocktail table or a dinner table. And that's personal space. So I'm in your virtual personal space just by having this conversation. And therefore we have a powerful human connection. So it's a really long, drawn out neuroscience based way of talking about the concept that you need photos and images and videos of people to illustrate your products and services. Don't just use words and diagrams and infographics.
That's really, really interesting.
Yeah. And it's fascinating how few organizations do it. You go
Yeah.
to the average tech startup website, and it's all about the tech, and it's all got these fancy diagrams, and it's got these big words, and it uses the word innovative a million times. But imagine how different it is if the first thing you see is the CEO talking to the camera on for 30 seconds saying why he or she started the company.
Love that. Yeah, and I see a lot of that. We do a lot of Y Combinator investing, so we see a lot of the demo videos.
Yep.
And yeah, now that you say it, the founders that are using themselves and explaining what's going on, and maybe it cuts to some of the product, and some people using it, but it's mainly the founders talking about it. It's a lot more
Yeah.
powerful.
It is. I think it is, and I'm glad that my daughter, who is my co-author in the book Fanocracy, she's did a neuroscience degree at Columbia, and so she's what got me really interested in this concept of neuroscience and digging into the idea of what can we learn from neuroscience around fandom and how and why people become fans. It was fun to dig into that idea.
That's amazing. So newsjacking became this global tactic after your book. How do you see it evolving now in this world of AI generated content?
So newsjacking is the art and science of injecting your ideas into a breaking news story. And I came up with that concept more than a decade ago because at the time that I first started talking about it, Google made a change. Prior to the change, Google's algorithms did not update when a website was changed. It took them a couple weeks or a couple of months to crawl your website. What that meant is that if you changed a page or you wrote a blog and you updated your blog, those changes would not be reflected in the Google search results for another couple weeks or months. But they changed that and Google went real time. And it was a very similar period of time around 2009, 2010 that Twitter started to take off. So two real-time changes in the way that people are looking at content happened around the same period of time. Twitter, instant communications, Google going real time with their content updates. And I realized my first job was on a bond trading desk in New York City. And on the bond trading desk, I learned you got to rely on the data, the news, the charts in real time to decide what bonds to trade. And so I was all about data, data, data. And then oh, wow, hey, the same thing is true in marketing. If there's a breaking news story, just like in the bond trading world, when the news story breaks, you make a trade, you can make money if you're quick. When a news story breaks and you're a marketer, if that news story has something to do with your business and you have the expertise to be able to comment on that news story, you can jump in and you could do a podcast episode about it right now. You could write a blog post about it right now. You could tweet with a hashtag right now. You could do a LinkedIn update right now. There's all sorts of things you could potentially do, and that then could then interest members of the media to then quote you as a source, or interest people who might want to buy a product or service that's related to the news story that's breaking. And that concept, when I first talked about it, became super popular. I don't know how many hits there are now, but certainly several 100,000 hits on Google if you were to go and do a search term for newsjacking. And a couple of years ago, it became it was entered into the Oxford English Dictionary, and they mentioned my name against it. So how cool is it to invent a concept that gets entered into the Oxford English Dictionary? So you asked me how it's changed. So what's changed is that the techniques to getting that content out there have changed because there's many other tools to get the content out there. And what's also changed is that a lot of people are misusing newsjacking in not using it in the way that I described it, which is your area of expertise is in demand right now. But people have been increasingly trying to newsjack any story and trying to tie their brand to any story. And that doesn't work as well as finding a story that's directly tied to you and your business. Let me give you an example of that. I speak at Tony Robbins' business mastery events around the world. Great program that Tony runs. Is a 5-day program. I do a 2-hour session on marketing at Business Mastery. And I met in your brain kicking in and saying, I don't know these people. I'm a little bit nervous. And if you walk into a room of people you know, your friends, your family, or interestingly, other clients of a company you do business with, and you're going to their client conference, all of a sudden there's strong positive connections with those people. And you can actually quantify how far away you are from somebody and how powerful that connection is. A gentleman named Russell Alexander, who's a lawyer at Business Mastery in January 2020. There were 2,000 people in the room. He came up to me afterwards and he said, David, I talked about newsjacking for part of my speech. And he said, David, I love this idea of newsjacking. I'm going to keep my eyes and ears open for an opportunity to do some newsjacking. And I said, great, let me know if you have a success. And 6 months later, he contacted me and he said, hey, I want to just let you know that you helped me to grow my business by 23%. I said, wow, what happened? Well, tell me about it. And he said that he's a lawyer in Canada, and I met him in January 2020. You know what happened a couple months later? The pandemic hit. So what Russ did was he created the COVID-19 and Family Law Information Center. He started a YouTube channel, and he started to write on his blog about anything he could think of related to the pandemic and family law. Now, that's a really esoteric topic.
Right.
But he became the worldwide expert, number one undisputed expert in the world on family law as it relates to the pandemic. So these are things like, for example, if two parents are divorced and they shared custody of their child, one parent wants the child to go to in-person school. The other parent wants the child to go to virtual school because they're afraid of the pandemic. Where does the law come down on that? And that's the kind of thing that Russ talked about. And he was quoted in the Globe and Mail, which is the most important newspaper in Canada, multiple times. He was on television news multiple times, radio, television, magazines, newspapers. He became the go-to source for that particular topic. And he had to hire 5 new attorneys just to handle the additional caseload coming into his firm. And so that's the idea of newsjacking. And it can be related to any topic that you have an expertise in. And it can absolutely 100% grow your business.
That's amazing. That's really good advice. So you've warned about AI-generated dreck versus artistic craft recently. What's your framework for deciding when to use AI and when to go human first?
I love artificial intelligence. I use it all the time, but I don't use it to create content for me using the public internet as the data set. So in other words, I don't go to ChatGPT and say, write me a blog post about B2B marketing or whatever it might be. I do use AI, as I mentioned earlier, using my own data to help me create original content. And I also use artificial intelligence to take an existing content piece and help to make it better. So what I'll do is I'm not very good at writing headlines. I'm pretty good at writing blog posts or chapters of books. I'm not really great at writing headlines. So I'll often take a draft of a blog post, run it into ChatGPT and say, please suggest some headlines for this blog post. And ChatGPT in 2 seconds comes up with a dozen headlines that I can choose from or choose one of them and rework it somehow. That's fabulous. What a great use case for AI and content creation. I will also use AI to help create an illustration, an image to illustrate that blog post. I used to use stock photography. I still sometimes do because I really try to make sure that all my images are legal. I'm not stealing someone else's image. So I go to buy a stock photo or whatever to illustrate my blog post. But now I'm increasingly using artificial intelligence to illustrate it. And I'll craft a pretty extensive prompt to help me to come up with that image. But what I'm not doing is asking the AI to create a blog post for me and do the whole thing. I call that AI dreck. It's regurgitation of other stuff that's out there. I want my content to be original. I absolutely use AI to help me, but I want my content to be original.
I'll find what I do is my form of newsjacking is, somebody famous will say something I agree with or don't agree with. I'll take the article, plug it into ChatGPT, and I'll dictate to ChatGPT for up to 5 minutes, 10 minutes of me just like, what about this? What about that? And that it will draft a response based on kind of the combination of what I just dictated and what the article said.
Nice. Yeah. So that's a great use case. I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Perfect.
So everything that you see coming out of Team Ignite is basically, it runs through AI, but it's me on the other side almost dictating it to an editor or writer. And then ChatGPT, of course, like polishes it up for me and writes it in more eloquent prose than I ever could.
And also makes it quicker. So you can respond to that famous person saying something way faster than if you had to manually do it. And I don't know about you, but in my case, if I had to respond quickly, but I had a bunch of meetings set up, I probably wouldn't do it. But if it's going to take me 5 minutes or 8 minutes or whatever, I will do it because I can have that help of AI.
So are there any companies or campaigns out there that you think are absolutely nailing it when it comes to this, real time or fan first marketing?
So for fan first, I've been a really big fan of the Savannah Bananas for a number of years now. I don't know if you've had any experience with the Savannah Bananas. They're a baseball team, and Jesse Cole happens to be a friend. He's the owner of the Savannah Bananas. He bought the team, I might be getting the date wrong, 6 or 8 years ago. And the first game that they played, that he was the owner, I think they had 100 people in the stands. And he decided, I'm going to make a fans first baseball experience. And so he started to change the rules of the way baseball is played in Savannah. And he had to create a second team in order for them to play, because he was now outside of the rule book of the minor league that he was playing, that the team is playing in. So they have fun rules, like if a fan catches a foul ball, it's an out, things like that. And they have one of the players is on stilts. They dance on the field. The umpire sometimes dances. It's really super fun and super interesting. Jesse is always out there talking. We talked earlier about the human approach. Jesse himself is always out there with fans. He wears a yellow tuxedo, so you can't miss him. Banana colored tuxedo. And today, the Savannah Bananas have more social media followers than any Major League Baseball team. They regularly sell out enormous stadiums. I saw them last year in Fenway Park, complete sellout. They've sold out every single game they've played for, I think, the last 4 or 5 years. They're now playing in football stadiums, like NFL football stadiums. They're playing. And Jesse is absolutely crushing it because he decided to reimagine how a 120-year-old game, baseball, that people think, I know what baseball is. It's slow, it's boring, and every once in a while something exciting happens. He reimagined for fans how you could do baseball differently, and he's become a phenomenon. Savannah Bananas, Google it, check it out. Really, really, really super cool stuff.
That was really cool. I had no idea. I did watch the Last Week Tonight episode on all the minor league baseball team brands recently. Came out about a month or two ago. It was pretty funny, and they offered to rebrand a minor league team.
I'm in awe of what he's done. He's created an incredibly valuable franchise. When I went to Fenway, fortunately I went as a guest of Jesse, so I was able to go on the field and meet the players and sort of sit wherever I wanted to. But at one time I was at the top of the stadium. I looked over the top. I could see the merchandise area. There was a line to get into the merchandise area. Then once you got into the merchandise area, there was a line to get to the different places that you could buy shirts or hats or balls or whatever they are. And as I was looking out at Fenway Park, it was yellow because nearly everybody was wearing a shirt. And at an average of $50, 30,000 fans. I mean, do the math. That's just one game. And he only had about 200 people who went to the first game that he played when he was an owner 6 or 8 years ago. What a fabulous outcome for Jesse.
Would love an intro. That sounds like a fascinating guest for the Ignite podcast.
There you go.
How do you think the pendulum swings between, performance marketing and organic storytelling over the next, 3 to 5 years?
Describe what you mean by performance marketing.
Well, I think I would think that's more of the paid marketing, right? Direct response, AdWords, things like that. At some point, somebody's going to monetize ChatGPT, or somebody will monetize these in a paid kind of AdWords kind of way.
I think the whole paid advertising universe, whether it's AdWords for Google and places like that, or the paid advertising on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, has become such a game of pennies for most brands, not all, but for many brands, that it's become really, really, really difficult to use it in a way that makes sense for a lot of different companies. So I know some consumer brands that are spending quite a lot of money on Instagram ads. And what they're saying to me now is, 5 or 10 years ago, let's say 5 years ago, you could spend $100 on Instagram ads and get $1,000 in sales. Now they're saying it's come down so much that you can spend $100 on Instagram ads and get like $120 in sales. So it's become a real math kind of issue where if you do a really scientific approach, you might be able to make a few pennies here and there, but it's getting increasingly difficult because you're up against Meta. You're up against Microsoft, who owns LinkedIn, Meta, who owns Instagram and Facebook. It's a challenge to essentially fight with the algorithms in such a way that your measly few dollars are going to make a positive ROI. And that's increasingly difficult. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying that some organizations don't have success, because some do. Absolutely. But it's really, really becoming hard to do that in such a way that I wouldn't want to devote my whole company to that. Certainly dabble, experiment, see if it can be useful for you, but I would say you also want to be focused on how you can generate attention on your own, be outside of just paying.
Let's shift gears and talk about tactics for founders and startups. Are there any tools or platforms that you're excited to recommend to startups right now that they should be using?
I ran across one recently that was pretty interesting. It goes back to what we were talking about before, the idea of creating your own customized proprietary AI generating engine. And if you want to know how to do that, I recommend the Marketing AI Institute. My buddy Paul Reutzer runs the Marketing AI Institute. I happen to be an advisor, and he's got what he calls the co-CEO. So Paul's the CEO of the Marketing AI Institute, and they've got a free podcast, got a bunch of other great stuff that you can check out. But his co-CEO is his own AI engine, and he tells you exactly how he put together, how it works, and then he provides detailed example of how you can create your own. So that's certainly something I would look at if you don't already have one. We were talking about this earlier in the show. If you don't already have one, that's a great place to start.
What should early stage founders think about when they're crafting their first public story or brand narrative?
Again, as we talked about it before, what are the problems that you solve? What are the problems that potential customers have that you solve? Don't just talk about your products and services. People are always interested in founder stories. What in the world caused you to create this company? Why did you decide to make this company, not another one? Why did you focus on this problem and not another one? People love that. That kind of thing. That's why they love to come on your show, right? They want to tell that story. Tell it. Let us know. We want to know what your founder story is. And one of the most surprising things that I learned when my daughter and I were writing this book, Fanocracy, was the power of passion. And so many founders are all business, right? They have a big fat brick wall going down the middle of their body. And on one side of that brick wall is their business life. And it's on LinkedIn and it's on their website, and they're very serious, and we're making this technology and it's going to change the world. And on the other side of this brick wall, they've got their Facebook or their Instagram or the other ways that they communicate with their personal life. Here's what I love to do. I love this particular sport. In my case, I love to surf. Or in my case, I love the Grateful Dead. I've seen them 111 times, and I wrote a book about them called Marketing Lessons from the Grateful Dead. And so the vast majority of startup founders and most business people, but for some reason, especially startup founders, they keep that brick wall in place, and they don't mix their business life and their personal life. I say bring them together. This was the most interesting and surprising aspect of our research into how and why people become fans of a product or service or idea or company, is because of the passion of the people within that company. And it's not just a passion for what their company does, it's a passion for life. It's a passion for the things that they love to do. And I mentioned HubSpot earlier in our discussion. I'm good friends with Brian Halligan. He's the CEO of HubSpot. He and I wrote the book Marketing Lessons from the Grateful Dead together with Bill Walton, the NBA basketball Hall of Famer, who we sadly lost last year. And Brian, as CEO at the time, he was CEO of HubSpot, and we went public in 2014. Brian's like, I'm a fan of the Grateful Dead. I want to play Grateful Dead music on hold during my first earnings call. And everyone told him not to do it. His PR people, his IR, investor relations people, all the agencies, and even some of the VCs said, why would you play Grateful Dead music on hold as people were waiting for your first earnings call? And he says, because I love the Grateful Dead, I want to share what I'm passionate about. So he did. And then the first question of when HubSpot was a public company 11 years ago, the very first question from JP Morgan, congratulations on going public. Thank you very much for playing Grateful Dead music on hold. My question is. And so
that's great.
I suggest to all founders and entrepreneurs and all business people, it's not just founders and entrepreneurs, but especially founders and entrepreneurs, show us what you love. Show us what you're a fan of. I'll give you some data for
like
how
all the
successful
video game
this
stuff
can
behind
be.
me. Yeah.
There you go. Right. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, here's my surfboard, right? It doesn't matter what it is. So I was doing this riff at an event a couple years ago. There's a dentist in the room. His name is Dr. John Marashi. He's in Southern California. Maybe you can find him if you look him up, Dr. John Marashi, Jon Marashi. And Dr. Marashi said to me, David, I don't have fans. I'm a dentist. And I said, I bet you can grow fans. Let's figure this out. What do you love to do? And he said, I love to skateboard. That's it. So at my prompting, John did all the work, but at my prompting, he started to bring skateboarding into his dental practice. He put skateboards on the wall in his office. He's been known to skateboard in the hallway. Now, he doesn't stand on a skateboard when he performs dental work, but he will sometimes skateboard in the hallway of the office. On his Instagram, he started to put videos and photos of him skateboarding. And he contacted me 6 or 9 months later and said, hey, David, the skateboarding thing, 23% growth in the number of patients in my practice, and a 20% growth in the revenue of my practice directly attributable to the fact that I'm talking about skateboarding, because people love the fact that I'm passionate about skateboarding. And so if you find Dr. John Marashi's Instagram, check it out. I think he's got like 50,000 followers now. And partly because he talks about skateboarding, and because when a new patient signs up for their first consultation, he says, how'd you find out about me? And people mention the Instagram and they mention skateboarding. He can actually measure the fact that by showcasing his passion, he is able to generate more business. So to all of you founders out there, and to anyone out there, but especially to those founders and entrepreneurs out there, show us what you're passionate about. Is it surfing? Is it the Grateful Dead? Is it skateboarding? What is it? Is it video games? What is it? We want to know, because that humanizes you.
I love that, and very inspiring. Now I'm thinking about how to rebrand Team Ignite around video games. So that's amazing. Well, let's wrap up with a quick rapid fire. So quick questions, quick answers. Sound good?
Yeah.
What's one marketing tactic you wish would die already?
I wish would die already. I don't know. Instagram ads are kind of boring to me, but it's not that big a deal. But yeah, let's die it.
Is Twitter still worth investing in as a channel now?
Twitter is still the real-time social network to go to. The members of the media still use it. I think it's still important.
AI-generated content, net positive or net negative for creativity?
Net positive for creativity, no doubt about it, if used in the way we talked about earlier in the show.
What's the most underrated channel for early-stage founders?
LinkedIn. Everyone uses LinkedIn, but it really, truly is still underrated.
To hear people on X bashed LinkedIn. I'm like, it's if you do B2B software and you're a founder, you need to be on LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn's super important.
Especially
for founders, because that's where you find VCs and journalists and all sorts of people.
What's the last campaign that made you say, wow, that was brilliant?
I don't really focus on the idea of a campaign. I don't like the war metaphor. So let me go back to one of the other questions. What do I want to die? I want the concept of a campaign to die. That's a campaign is a war metaphor. It's an advertising agency concept. Not really my thing.
Yeah, because your thing is really live your brand in perpetuity. It's this thing that
Yeah. I
lives. It's
mean,
not this thing that you go
I'm
execute on the battlefield.
right. I'm not going to have a campaign if I'm Dr. John Marashi to talk about skateboarding this month. Skateboarding is a part of my life if I'm Dr. John Marashi.
I love that. What's a book not your own that every founder should read?
A classic. I think it's 25 years old now. Purple Cow, Seth Godin.
Oh, that's a good one. I remember that one. Yeah, I haven't read that in a long time either.
I need to reread it. I need to reread it too. I've read it twice. Once when it first came out. Once about 10 years later.
Yeah,
I love Seth. I've read everything
he's a
he's
great
written.
author.
Great
Yeah.
guy.
Would you rather go viral on TikTok or land a quote in the Wall Street Journal?
All depends on what product or service I'm selling. One or the other is great, but it really depends on what you're doing.
Well, this was such a good conversation. I'm so glad that we sat down. Where can folks find you online?
Thanks, Brian, for having me on. This has been great. Here's something for a founder. Make sure you're findable. There are many, many David Scotts out there. That's why I use my middle name and have done so for about 30 years professionally. David Meerman Scott. Google it. I'm the only one. You'll find me. DM Scott on Instagram or Twitter, and you'll find me there as well.
Well, thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Brian.